Would it be acceptable for a trans girl to use a girl's toilet?
So it's very difficult for me as Education Secretary to comment on specific examples, Graham. You'll understand that.
Who'd have ever thought school toilets could be a hot topic of political debate? But they are in Scotland. Now in Scotland, the transgender issue has been channeled in certain directions because it's generally been feminists who've been opposing it and been having the publicity as they opposed it. And top of their agenda tends to be women's and girls only spaces, toilets, changing rooms. So that's what's tended to dominate the agenda in Scotland. But what's been happening in Scottish schools is that they've been moving from having boys' toilets and girls' toilets to having unisex toilets. And this is a nod, basically they're trying to keep LGBT Youth Scotland happy by having unisex toilets. Okay, there have been a few sexual assaults in these toilets, but the Scottish Government thinks that's a small price to pay for enacting transgender ideology in the facilities of a school. So that's what was happening, but then the law came along. And there's a law back from the 1960s that's about what facilities you need in a school. So it would say, for example, if you were at a primary school with 300 pupils, then there's a formula that tells you how big the assembly hall needs to be, how big your dining hall needs to be, how big your classrooms, how many classrooms you need. And it also tells you what area needs to be allocated to boys' toilets and what area needs to be allocated to girls' toilets. So this law has nothing to do with transgenderism. It had barely been invented when this law was written. It's just sensible advice, guidance, law about what you have to include in a school premises. So it says you have to have boys' toilets and girls' toilets. So when the Scottish Government has said, just have unisex toilets, that's actually illegal. You can't do that. Now, they could have gone and repealed the law. I don't know why they didn't try to do that, but anyway, they haven't. Then alongside that, we've got the Supreme Court judgment that I think there is total confusion about. The Supreme Court judgment just defined sex in terms of the Equality Act. So what does that have to say about toilets in school? Well, not much, not anything really. It says you can have a single sex space that is just for biological sex, but it doesn't say you have to. It doesn't say toilets have to be these things. So I think the Supreme Court judgment is a little bit of a red herring, as it is virtually everywhere, I think. So anyway, so schools are now going to have boys' toilets, girls' toilets, but they've also got disabled toilets as well, accessible toilets as they're called. And sometimes schools have just got like an individual toilet. You've got a corridor and a door, one toilet in it. So the facilities are there for boys, for girls, accessible toilets, and also probably some individual toilets as well. So what you do with so-called trans pupils? Well, boys go to the boys' toilet. I hope this is making sense. Girls go to the girls' toilet. And so-called trans pupils, they could go to the disabled, to the accessible toilets or individual toilets. Problem solved. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? But listen to the Scottish Education Secretary providing clarity on how this will work in schools.
Would it be acceptable for a trans girl to use a girl's toilet?
So it's very difficult for me as Education Secretary to comment on specific examples, Graham. You'll understand that because I don't know the nature of the case, the nature of the individual involved.
But it's a general principle though, isn't it?
I hear the point that you're making, but that would be a matter for the individual education authority to engage with parents and carers, to engage with the head teacher, but also to engage with their wider school community. We don't foist decisions on schools in Scotland. We work with our education authorities, with our head teachers.
Okay,
we did exactly the same, actually.
But what about parents? What about parents that might be concerned by that? Parents who don't believe in trans rights, they might object against this and say, well, actually, the spirit of the law would suggest that children should use the toilet that aligns with their biological sex.
I understand that, and I understand that there may be parents who have those concerns, but that's why, of course, the revised guidance talks about the need for education authorities and schools to take decisions in relation to the individual.
So essentially it is up to the schools then. I mean, this sounds like a bit of a mess, doesn't it? That different schools could have different policies and no one really knows what the principle is.
No, because the law is very clear in relation to biological sex, and that, of course, has been stipulated by the Supreme Court ruling. So the guidance has been updated in that regard.
But you've not, you say that you can't say to me whether a trans pupil should or should not visit a toilet which aligns with their biological sex. You say that you can't tell me the answer to that.
I say to you, Graham, that decision has to be informed by the individual needs and circumstances of that pupil.
Which means the policy could be different in every school up and down the country.
Well, it would depend on the individual needs of the circumstances of the young person, for example. But it's difficult for any education secretary to talk specifically about an individual case, because the legal requirement to make that decision around about the provision of toilets is a matter for the local authority.
Isn't it the case that in this matter, the Scottish Government is absolving itself of its responsibility and is putting those very difficult decisions onto the hands of teachers and parents?
No, I wouldn't accept that. And of course, the statutory responsibility, as I mentioned, for the delivery of education in Scotland rests with our councils. What we can do as a government, though, is to provide that clarity.
Well, if that's providing clarity, I would hate to hear her providing confusion and muddle. I mean, this is a Swineyism in action. That's like John Swinney speak, isn't it? Just this bureaucratic verbiage. No clarity, no acknowledgement of the core issue, no cut through to the heart of the matter. I mean, it's almost as if she's banking on you falling asleep or changing channel before you've actually realised what she's saying and you can start objecting to it. So let's say we're in a school and we're going with the Education Secretary's advice. So you've got a trans girl, in other words a boy, who wants to use the girls' toilet. You've got to involve the whole community in making the decision. I mean, how does that work? You have an open meeting of all the parents of the school and all the girls in the school as well. Get them all in the assembly hall, then say, right, this meeting's been convened to try and decide where Ethel is going to go to the toilet in the school. Ethel says she wants to go to the girls' toilets. What's everyone think? And then the next year, you've got a new set of pupils, new set of parents, so you'd have to have the meeting again, I assume. And then how does this meeting conclude? You need a unanimous vote? I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, it's a nightmare for schools. Then to compound that, the guidance that the Scottish Government has issued, it says schools may require to take legal advice on any approach. So let's say 70% of the pupils say it's fine for Ethel to go in the girls' toilet, 40% of the parents say it's fine, 60% say it's not fine, the solicitor says who knows what. I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. What a total nightmare for schools. And why we're in this situation, because the SNP will not say, we're not going to have boys going into girls' toilets, we're not going to have girls going into boys' toilets. They will not say that because they're wedded to transgender ideology. Now, if the people in charge of education in Scotland can't work out clearly who should go to which toilet, then what chance have we got of them dealing with all the other issues in Scottish education? Not a lot, I suggest. Anyway, so that's the toilet issue. How about the rest of this guidance supporting transgender pupils in schools? It was issued in 2021. Most of it is unchanged. I'll give you a quick recap of the appalling things in it. Right, number one, schools are told to promote gender change as normal, natural and healthy. For example, by reading books, sharing books, having books in the library about transgenderism. Number two, schools are instructed to celebrate transgenderism. For example, to mark Transgender Day of Visibility. And these posters are actually from the guidance, so they're provided to schools to put up. The government recommends it. We celebrate transgender visibility, respect everyone's gender identity, use the pronouns people ask you to use. And the next one, gender is not this, girl or boy locked. So you're locked into being a girl and a boy. So the Scottish Government wants posters in schools saying you're not locked in to being a girl or a boy. Okay, extremely dangerous, destructive message, but that's what the Scottish Government is putting in schools. Now, if I was a member of the SNP, if I was an SNP MSP, if I was a member of the Scottish Government, I would resign over this. I was saying, if you're doing this to children, promoting this to children in schools, then that's just a red line. I cannot accept that in good conscience, and I would resign. Right, number three, what else is in the guidance? It says, basically, accept and honour every decision by a child to change gender. In other words, if a little boy comes along and says, actually, I'm a girl, then that is fact. That a new fact has emerged from the universe that this boy is actually a girl. And everything now has to be structured around this newly discovered fact. So the response from the teacher should be, oh, thanks for telling me. What would you like us to call you now? What pronouns would you like us to use? The teacher is not to say, it explicitly says do not say, this could just be a stage. Even though in a substantial majority of cases, it is just a stage. But teachers are told you can't say that. Because this is a new fact that must be cemented into reality. This guidance makes it clear that this applies in primary schools as well. So, 5-year-old, boy, I'm a girl. Oh, are you? Okay, great. What would you like us to call you? And the other question it says about when a pupil says that they're transgender is, are they being supported at home? Now, you can imagine what that means, can't you? You can imagine what supportive parents are, can't you? You can imagine what unsupportive parents are. Parents that say, oh, no, you're not. Oh, come on, don't be silly. You're a boy. Of course you're a boy. That's just nonsense. Come on, just leave that behind. There would be unsupportive parents. That would be quite a major concern by the sounds of it. Number 4, problem with this guidance is it offers children the option of keeping gender changes secret from parents. I will read you a quotation from the guidance. A transgender young person may not have told their family about their gender identity. Inadvertent disclosure could cause needless stress for the young person or could put them at risk and breach legal requirements. Therefore, it is best not to share information with parents or carers without considering and respecting the young person's views and rights. So, sorry parents, the school's going to walk down this path of gender change with your child, and very likely you won't know anything about it until later. Everyone at school will know, the teachers will know, the other pupils will know. Maybe the other pupils will tell their parents, but as the parents of the child who's going down this dangerous path, you might well be the last to know. Quite appalling. Then they've got another poster to use here. Why support for trans youth matters. So this is about parents, and the basic message is, if you're a parent who says, discourages gender change, or says, no, there's no such thing as gender change, or we don't think this is a good idea, or slow down a bit, or this is probably a phase you're going through. So this poster is designed to terrify those sort of parents. I won't go into great details, but look at the bottom right. So if your son or daughter says they're transgender, if you support them, in other words, oh, that's really great, we're delighted you've discovered who you really are, would you like us to go and buy you a dress, what would you like us to call you, or whatever, the chance of suicide is 4%, attempted suicide is 4%. If you're the sort of parent who says, well, we're not really sure about this, don't think this is a good idea, the chance of suicide apparently is 57%. In other words, if you don't parent in line with LGBT ideology, your child will probably try to commit suicide. And the research this is based on is laughable. It's from Canada. It included a mere 84 subjects, and each of them, the way it worked is a self-selecting sample, signing up on a website or whatever, and each person who did the survey could get 3 of their mates to do it as well. So a self-selected activist survey from years ago in Canada with only 84 pupils, and it's reproduced in a government document. But the graphic designer's very professional. But that's Scottish politics. Basically, the appearance is pretty impressive. What's underneath it is very insubstantial. Right, last thing in the guidance, number 5, is it says misgendering is not allowed. So staff, you have to go along with the pronouns and the description, the names, whatever, that people want you to use. Also, other pupils have to do that. Well, that's a disciplinary offence if there is such a thing in Scottish schools. So pupils have to also go along with something that they might not actually believe. So what we've got here, schools are still instructed to promote the false and dangerous ideology of transgenderism to children, and that will continue to have, it is already, and will continue to have appalling consequences for children and families. I've sat down with several sets of parents and heard heartbreaking stories of the effect of this policy in action. Now, promoting transgenderism in school, as far as I'm concerned, is like promoting smoking. It's like having a lesson that says, hey kids, smoke in school. Anyone fancy it? We'll give you a cigarette if you like. We'll keep it secret from your parents. Some people are just smokers. Maybe you are. If you are, then we'll give you a cigarette. That is just great. That's what it's like, promoting something that is known to be so harmful and dangerous in the longer term. On the Police Scotland website, it gives a definition of child abuse. And it says, child abuse is any action that causes or is likely to cause significant harm to a child. Tick. Right, as the Scottish Family Party, we would totally eliminate transgender ideology from schools, and also we'd pull it up by the roots by changing the law. The law says a man can become a woman can become a man if they fill the right forms in. We would scrap that, and in order to scrap that law, we'd also need to leave the ECHR. So that is necessary as well. So hope that was interesting. If you've got any suggestions for video topics for the future, just put them into the comments. I don't think I've ever said that before, but I'm very open to hear suggestions. Right, thanks for watching, and see you next time.